I can see the little eyeball on my screen, so I'm like, are we live yet?
Now we are.
We are live. Christian Lavolsi, welcome to the hot seat. It is Tuesday. We are back. And today I want to dig in and talk all about culture. Now, we've talked about culture before in terms of, you know, how you have culture internally inside of your teams. Flip it a little bit today. And I wanted to ask you some questions about culture in your business as to how you display it to your clients or to your stakeholders and those kinds of things. So, I guess my first question for you, Christian, we're getting straight into it today, is what is your definition of culture inside of your business?
We have a little person who's come to say hi.
After I just said, Mummy's going live with Christian on the video, don't come in. And I have a little
Hey,
person
Riley.
here already.
That's Riley, right?
You'll have to, yes, it is. You'll have to
You know,
wait till after.
what does he want? Access to an iPad?
No, he wants food. He's hungry.
Ah,
Although they've
oh,
already had lunch.
but
But
don't you,
anyway,
don't
let's
you,
get.
wait a second, wait a second. You actually are really organized. You normally have,
Yes,
during your workday, all their food already, even when they're on holidays, pre-packed in the fridge that they can just go and
that's
grab.
correct. Yes.
Has he gone through
And they're not
everything?
allowed to come and ask me. Yeah, they're not allowed to come and ask me for food until their lunch box is empty and he's eaten all his food. So now he's allowed to come and ask for food because he has no more of his
Right. I love that. Like,
allocated food for the day.
it's really cool because you have these really cool, quirky things that you do that keep your shit organized while you're able to work. But I think what you need to compensate for is those boys are now growing up and they might need to consume more food. Riley, being the middle child, is probably sitting there trying to work out who's he going to steal some stuff from. Ethan or his little brother Blake. Anyway, we're not here
That's
to talk about
right.
that, but you do have
We're
some really
not.
cool little. Maybe you should do a little video for all the mums that are listening, just around
Mm,
how you organise your day from a food perspective, even though the boys are home, and so it creates
yeah.
order, not like my house where it's just chaos. Um, but anyway, no, I won't get
No,
myself
there's
into
a lot of
trouble.
discipline and order in our house. That's how I run my castle here, and I like it that way.
It might have
Doesn't
nothing
work
to
for
do.
everyone, but it certainly works for us.
It might not have anything to do with the fact that your husband is a police officer as well, and he walks around with a weapon of mass destruction. No, not at all. Gav's awesome. But all right,
Hmm.
Simone, what are we here talking
Let's
about
get
today?
back into this. I want to talk today about culture and not just in culture of, you've got your vision and mission written on the board and on the wall somewhere in your office, all those sorts of things. I mean, like, what does culture in your business really mean to you? Delivering that to your clients, to your other stakeholders. What is culture?
Oh, that is the question.
Yeah.
All right.
What does
I
it
mean,
really mean to you? What's your definition of culture?
look, in a business setting, and really, whether it's in business or not, even in your own family environment, culture refers to shared values and behaviors, as well as beliefs that determine how you or a company or its employees interact with one another and each other, um, as well as how they interact with other stakeholders, right? So even
Mm,
if it's external to that, culture shapes um, both the social and psychological environments of a household, a friendship circle, and an organization. So it often guides how our decisions are made, how people behave, and ultimately, how we operate. So as a business or even as individuals, and
mm,
really, it's how we operate on a day to day basis. And I think so many people undervalue the word culture and relate it just to business, but it's to everything that we do. It's it's the friendship circle you frequent. If you don't have shared and aligned values, then you're likely not to be friends with those people, right? And that is
mm,
why friendship circles can change. Um, People come into our lives for different reasons. Same thing with employees. So making sure that talent comes into your organization um, under at least the guidance, right, of the values that you have is critical. And you must also demonstrate. There's no point in having these values up on a wall that no one follows, right? So, um,
Yeah.
so key components of, say, business culture, Simone, to help, those service-based business owners out there and other business owners. Um, there are what, 5 real components to it, and one being values, the norms, the symbols, the language and the communication, and rituals, right? So rituals and routines,
Mm.
habits. So, what is the impact then of, I'm not going to go into the detail of all those, that's a bit complex, but the impact
Yeah.
of say, culture, and it's obvious everywhere, right? You can smell bad culture, you can see bad culture, and you can also taste great culture, right? Um,
Mm.
but a strong and positive culture, Simone, it will foster engagement. It boosts morale. It enhances productivity. It creates an environment where people feel valued and motivated. And you know, conversely, a weak and negative culture will actually lead to low morale, high turnover, toxic workplaces. And I know people know a lot about toxic workplaces, and
Mm.
what it does, that it actually undermines leadership and undermines the organization. And as a chair and as a board member, one of the things that we do is we set the culture at board level and make sure that the pulse of the organization flows through. That's something that boards never used to be concerned about, but in the last 10 or 15 years, that's certainly been more important. And so,
Mm.
if boards are thinking about culture and they want to demonstrate the same culture that's within the company at board level or vice versa, then it's really important for the allied health practitioner who owns a practice with 1, 2, even 3 people, or let's say it's a physiotherapist that operates out of a medical center. You've got parallels, and you need to be able to bring that vortex together. So, um,
Mm.
what are some of the actionable insights that people can do? I mean, one is always assess and articulate your current culture. Put it down on paper. We make our people in growth school, our members in growth school, our students, um, focus on every 90 days. So it's a constant reminder, and that creates the reps. And I think the other thing
Yeah.
is that you've got to lead by example. Your entire leadership, you know, culture grows from the bottom up, but it is implemented from the top down. Right?
Mm.
Really important. Um, and so the other one is always, and my favorite, foster an open communication. Like if you don't have
Mhm.
feedback loops, you're really in trouble.
Yeah, I love those insights. And for me, coming from a corporate background where I can still picture where the 13 values were written on the wall, I actually cannot recite any of them to you. And I was there for 13 years. So it is one of those things that it was somewhat seen, but never really practiced or implemented. I wonder if you could just touch a little bit for us, Christian, on what about the solopreneurs out there? Because when I left corporate and I went into my own business, I thought culture was irrelevant for me. I didn't understand how that actually played a part for me. So, what would you say to people who don't necessarily have a team or anything yet, if they're just by themselves in their business? What would culture mean for you if you were solo?
Well, it's actually even more important. So, great question. If you're a solo entrepreneur or solopreneur, um, your culture allows you to attract more of the right clients, because
Mm.
not only do you need to have aligned values and shared values with your talent, with the members of your team, it's all stakeholders. So if
Hmm.
I know people who say, "Oh my God, I hate my clients and I can't attract enough of the people that I want. I get all these people," and then you look at their content and you're like, you're talking to the people you're attracting, mate. You're acting like a
Mm.
complete douchebag, so you're attracting the douchebags. You know, if
Yeah,
for
okay.
example, let's say that you want to attract, let's say you're a solo entrepreneur, you're a coach, um, and I don't know, you're a mindset coach, and you're targeting tradies, and if you are driving a really high powered sports car, and you're
Hmm.
talking with strength and gusto, and you're training in the gym. You're being relatable to those people, but you're also demonstrating them who you are. Now let's reverse
Hmm.
that. And tradies are big personalities. They got lots of money. They don't necessarily know what to do with it. They overspend. They overcapitalize. They think everything is a flow because that's what they've learnt when it's not the case. And they're
Mm.
amazing at what they do, and they're amazing, and so they grow. But then they don't understand the support network they need. So you've got to create your own tribe of people, and that is reaching out and finding those people. So but imagine if you were a tradie and you were looking for a coach, you'd go with the person driving high powered sports car, showed fame, success, but someone who could speak your language, someone who listened to the same music that you did. So this is where values and interests and beliefs really play an important part, even as a solo entrepreneur.
Mm.
But you're also going to get to a point where you're going to be employing people. So you need to
Yep.
attract those. I mean, to me, recruitment is a marketing function, right? And marketing is a
Hmm.
recruitment function. And the easiest way to market yourself to the world is to share your values, your beliefs, um, your how you go about your routines, so that people can relate to you. So it's incredibly important, Simone. Not
Mm.
just because it's important for your team, but it's actually even more important for a potential prospect to join you.
Yeah, okay. So this is really starting to naturally progress into my second question here, and that was, is culture something you only see inside of the business, or is it something that's expressed externally as well? So that's basically what you're saying, right? It's not just what you see behind closed doors, but it's a demonstration of yourself and all of those things.
Absolutely. I mean, look, culture within a business shouldn't be confined to the internal workings of your organization or your company, whether you work online, whether you're a bricks and mortar business, whether you're a drop ship kind of business. It's a dynamic
Mm.
asset. And when
Mm.
expressed externally, as I was just saying, it actually can significantly enhance your company's brand image, your customer
Mm.
relations, but your overall market position. I have one of our values is we have an absolute no bullshit approach. We seek, see, and think differently. And anyone that knows me and has been watches my stuff, I'm not your normal thinker, right? Like I think
Mhm.
way outside the square. Some people think that it's potentially my risk aversion and my risk appetite, but it's got nothing to do with it. I'm actually quite risk reserved when it comes to client work. Um, Very different to my investment portfolio. But it's the divergent thinking that comes from that. But they're two of our primary values. The other one is we fail forward. We don't just sit back and go, oh yeah, well we failed. What do we learn from that experience? You know, um,
Mhm.
we've got very good routines that keep us structured. So we I think that anyone that knows us, and that's what we attract. We attract misfits, doers, victors. We attract fucking lions, right? Because we are lions, right? And we protect each other. Like our tribe is very, very, culty almost in some extent because of our values. Like, we really care about each other, but care is not one of our values. It's one of our competencies. It's what we're really,
Mhm.
really good at doing. And that brings the other. So, you've got this internal, external culture scenario. So, you know, culture governs, how the employees interact with each other and how work is conducted. But externally, what it does, it actually influences how the business interacts with its customers, its suppliers, its broader community. So this outward expression, Simone, is visible in customer service practices, marketing materials, public relations, and even in the partnerships
Mm.
that we have. Like the guest speakers that we bring into our intensives, they've got to be aligned. Bronwyn, my guru, she comes and speaks at every one of those because I have values
Mhm.
alignment, and that's part of me that I want to share with people. It's my secret weapon on how I maintain balance and order in my life. You know,
Yeah.
um, so so I guess that there are some benefits in expressing culture externally beyond what I've said. One of them is brand differentiation. customer loyalty, attracting talent, which I've already talked about. But the big one, the community relations. Jody and the team at Bohu Engineering have an incredible culture. And anyone who's lucky
Mm.
enough to get to go out to Bohu and watch them build some of the largest steel structures in the country for mining, for defense, for infrastructure, for dip tie, you know. But you have a look, and the culture throughout the production team, the paint shop, the admin team, the marketing team, it's all one, right? And when I
Mm.
first got there, they had these amazing values up on the wall, but no one knew them. And so we
Yeah.
reworked them, and we made them things that people could relate to, and now they're everywhere, and people live and breathe them, and they have a purpose that they're
Mm.
all aligned to, which is together they thrive, and that's that community element. They're 160 kilometers out of the city, so it's a regional business taking on the big boys and girls all over the country, and that wouldn't
Yeah.
happen if it wasn't for the culture, right? It would not
Mm.
happen if it wasn't for their culture. So I guess then you've got to look at how do you express that culture externally. Look, customer experiences, transparency, and what I mean by that is sharing stories and examples of your culture in action. Just like I sort of just hinted some now. The consistency in your communication. Share your values with the world so that your prospects can engage with you, communicate with you, interact with you, and get to know you. Okay, and I want to
Okay.
use a really good example, and I use Patagonia a fair bit because I
Yeah.
love that company. For those that are listening in for the first time, Patagonia, and I came across them when I was doing my MBA some 6 years ago, and I fell in love with the company and their founder. It's an outdoor clothing brand, and it's the prime example of a company that effectively expresses its culture both internally and externally, and it's known for its environmental activism. Patagonia's culture is all about sustainability and responsibility, and it's evident in their product design, in their marketing strategies, and also in their involvement in the environmental communities that they're involved in. Now, this transparent expression of its culture, it actually it resonates with its customers, but also with its employees alike. And what that does is create this incredibly strong loyalty and this amazing positive corporate image. And that's it helped them increase their sales tenfold. But that is the founder who, wanted to make really good change in the world. And so now the people that work at Patagonia are all environmentally conscious, and so are their customers. And that linkage creates brand loyalty that people don't care how much they're paying for the product, right? So
Mm.
there's all of those elements. So that's
Okay.
that's kind of
I
my
just
answer. I know
ask
it's a little
another
bit
little
long, but
cheeky question. This is not my third question, but I want to ask, is there a line to cross? Like, is there a door that should be closed with what's kept as internal culture and external? Or is it just an open door? It's there for the world to see.
look, I think that Simone, the days of um, the days of the lack of transparency that we used to see that companies used to have is gone out the window with social media, right? We live in
Mm.
a hyper connected world where if you don't show people who you really are, you are leaving yourself open for criticism, for judgment, and for all of the good stuff that human, nature is founded on. I'm being sarcastic,
It's
right?
quite
Like
interesting, though,
like
isn't it? Because people don't want to share that for fear of judgment. But you're
yeah,
saying if you don't share it, you're going to be judged anyway.
absolutely, because there's always going to be someone who doesn't like what you do or who you are. So if you're out there and you're not posing and not pretending and you're being who you are, if someone does want to come after you, it's going to be pretty hard. Now, if you're a
Mm.
dickhead and you have no integrity and you are a criminal, then sure, you go out and pose that. Good luck, but you will attract other criminals. Like for example,
Mhm.
and I'm not, I don't want to get myself in any hot water here, but outlawed motorcycle gangs, right? They've got a very clear culture, and it's evident. Intimidation. They've got patches. They've got jackets. They've got bikes. how many times you hear a massive Harley Davidson roar behind you, and instantly you're like, oh, bikers. But then there's a whole bunch of
Mm.
people that are business people who love Harleys and cruise Harleys, right? But the thing is, there's this culture, this stigma that's created. But they have to represent that 1%, as they put it, because they need to attract new members, but also because they need
Mm.
to inflict that fear into the wider universe. And I'm handpicking the outlaw motorcycle groups, but I think it's a good
Yeah.
example of a set of people with certain values, and they
Hmm.
share those values to attract more members, but also to disparage and unqualify all the people that don't want to be part of it. So that's a really good
Yeah.
example of, actually, I've never used that as an example, but as my brain's unpacked, it's a very good example of the response to that question. So, I
Hmm.
think that you've got to be mindful that whatever you project out there, if it's you, well, you're going to be judged for being you, and that's okay. You got to be
Mm.
happy with who you are. And
Yeah.
that's another conversation another day.
We've all got to keep doing the work ourselves, that's for sure.
Got to do the
Okay,
reps.
so I want to move into my third question for you today, Christian. And I want to ask you, what should you do if you don't have a good culture? So, if you know that there's some toxicity going on, whether it's with your clients or whether it's with your team, who's who's responsible for addressing it and what should you do about it?
Sorry, I'm laughing because the one thing you shouldn't do is hire fancy culture consultants, right? Like these
I
consultancy
didn't even know that was
companies.
a thing. Is that a
Oh,
thing?
it,
You
it
can
is a
hire
thing. It is
culture
a thing,
consultants.
and I'll tell you who it's a thing for. Universities,
Mm.
who have crap culture most of the time. Why? Lots of smart people with lots of egos, right? So it's but they go governments, right? Normally the big firms they go and hire these so-called transformational consultants. You know, um, it's like digitization, right? It's a myth,
Hmm.
but you don't have to go and pay one of the big four millions of dollars, right? And so this conversation is for a whole bunch of different people. If you're a small business, then you don't have the luxury to go and hire anyone most of the time. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't need to go and spend any money, no matter where you are. What you need to do is do a
Hmm.
simple exercise. Look inwards, right, as the founder, and ask yourself, or as the leader, and ask yourself, what am I okay with? Right? That's probably the first thing. Why am I here? Why did I build this business? Right? Why did I start this company? Why did I employ these people? Um, Strip the emotion out and really dig deep and understand. Right? So, if and again, what is a bad culture? Is a bad culture one employee telling you they don't like the way you speak to them, or is it
Mm.
in a company of 20, or is that because that person's a bit weak? Right? And again, that is a culture question, right? Why did you let that person come and work in your organization in the first place? Right? Like, come on, we're all about transparency. I'm not an easy person to work for, right?
Mm.
But I'm fair, aren't I? Like, I'm incredibly fair, but I'm firm. And all I want is order. I want to know that what we're working on, because we work at speed. Isn't that right, Simone? This is your opportunity
Yeah.
to have a go at me, right? But no, the truth is, but we have a very transparent environment that we work in. Not everyone can cope with that. Yet, we've got like a 90% retention rate. Because if you don't cut it, you don't come here in the first place. We
Yeah.
scrutinize, where did I find you? Right? Like, do you
Mm.
know what I mean? Like, it's where we find our future employees that matters. Um, I work with some really large organizations that weren't large to start with. And you've got to keep working through. And and a lot of the time it's the people that you've hired that create the culture. And if they're not aligned with your values, then guess what's going to happen? They're going to deviate. So let's look at answering your question. So transform. Let's assume you've got a bad culture. And again, I don't really understand what a good and a bad culture is, because that's very personal, right? But let's say you've got a
Hmm.
toxic culture, right? So what you need to do is you need to look at what's contributing positively and negative to your organization. Okay, that's where you've got to start. But there is about 8 steps that I think that I've used to when I've had to go in and do some reverse takeovers or M&As. That's generally where we see, especially when we try and do mergers and acquisitions. You got, say, 2 organizations. There's normally one good one buying an average one, and this is where the shit show
Mm.
begins, right? And so
Yeah.
I kind of always say, okay, let's assess the current culture of both organizations, right? Let's do the litmus test. But in this case, let's look at one company. Let's assess the culture, right? So conduct surveys, interviews, focus groups, whatever it takes. Sit down with people. When I started at Bohu Engineering as their senior advisor before I became chair, I interviewed everyone in the leadership team, every single person. And Jody and Jeremy were like, we've never seen anyone do this before. So what do you mean? How am I meant to provide you with advice if I don't know what your leadership team's like? I need to
Mm.
understand how they are. And that's when I realized that these values that were on the board, that people knew about them and they played to them, but they never really dived deep into them. Right? So we never got the very best out of people. And they were an amazing company before I even got there. That's the caveat, right?
Mm.
Like, they were already amazing. They were already good. Let's use the word good. We took them to great as a company, right? There's
Mm.
been a lot of structural changes internally in order to do that over 3 years, part of the strategy, right? But when we went in there, they had a really good culture, but we had to assess it. We had to identify what those core values were, and we tweaked them because there wasn't alignment with everybody in the organization. And when you've got heavy steel manufacturing, and you've got everything from metal fabricators to boilermakers to paint shop managers to inventory people to 6-7 people in a project management team to leadership to admin staff to reception to marketing. That's a lot of different bloody personalities, right? And you got to
Yeah,
align them.
100%.
So then what you got to do is you got to develop a culture improvement plan, right? And how you're going
Mm.
to roll that out. And so that's all the initiatives that you do to get buy-in from people. Then you've got to communicate those changes, and you've got to clearly express the intentions. Like, what are you trying to do? Sorry, my chair broke, and I've got this makeshift chair that sucks, right? So I'm constantly I'm like being my son. I'm moving in my chair. Then you've got to lead by example, okay? Because remember what I said: culture starts at the top, but it actually grows from within and grows from within. But you plant the seeds at the bottom so it flourishes up, right? And Bohu
This is
Engineering
a
is the
really
most.
new concept a lot of people would not have heard about. So I think we definitely need to dig into this on another episode because I'm sure you have a lot of people thinking right now, what are you talking about that it comes from the bottom
Yeah,
and
look. I mean, I love this stuff because I think you transform organizations this way. And it's not just
mm,
about culture. It's just how I guess that's how I transform companies that I have the privilege to serve, right? And so the framework then goes. You then got to go and provide the training and the tools, and really got to embrace people. Then you got to celebrate as well as reinforce the desired behaviors that you want. Okay. And I guess finally,
mm.
you've got to look at the reviews and the audits and that feedback loop that I'm so bloody passionate about, right? And so I want to give you a really good example of a company that did this well, or did this extraordinary well through some change. And again, Microsoft, right? And not under Bill Gates's leadership, actually under Satya Nadella, right? So Microsoft underwent what we would define as significant cultural transformation, right? And Nadella shifted the culture from one of known for its internal competition, okay, and aggression, to one focused on collaboration, innovation, and growth mindset. It's huge. Like, anyone who really wants to dive in this stuff, go read about it. So this involved changing the internal metrics that the original founders had created, redefining all the leadership qualities, and integrating the new culture into all the aspects of that business. And as a result, Microsoft saw improvements in employee morale, innovation, and financial performance, which the board was like, wow. Okay, so
Mm.
there is a huge global company in the top 5 companies in the world who underwent a significant transformational shift. That didn't take a week. Okay,
Yeah.
so if I had to give anyone some actionable insights from this, because I'm conscious of time, you've got to set clear milestones. Okay,
Hmm.
you got to create those feedback loops, and you got to be patient and persistent. I as you know, I've been taking a few random sales calls just to see what people are out there, and I got lots of feedback for us to talk about, and a couple of people out of the three are signing up as we speak. Um, so there might be some value in me jumping into some calls, but that's because I get so personal. One of the people were like, "Wow, I know you came highly recommended from Di Thompson, actually, if she's listening. Di is a very good friend of mine. Was the operations manager at One Advisory, an amazing accounting firm, led by really cool people. David Swink is one of the partners. So is Dom. They're really good people. And Di is one of my champions. She will go out. We sat on boards together, and she said to these people, just get him to talk, right? Ask serious questions and get him to talk. He'll solve your problem on the call. And when I got off the call, as I was getting up, they were like, "So how do we buy from you?" I'm like, "Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you." And they're like, "Yeah, because we now know you can solve our problem for us." And I think that's me being me. Like, I want to help people. So that's the underlying current of care, which is that competency. But I think what people need to understand is that you've got to be patient, and you've got to find the people that have your shared values and alignment, because ultimately, without it, you're just a shell.
Yeah.
And for me, we say no more than we say yes. People say to me, "Oh, you've only got 15 people in your growth school," and it's like, yeah, by choice, right? Absolutely by choice. Will that be the case at the end of September? No. We're going to go to 20. We've opened up 5 spots. Sorry, they're already taken. Like, we already know. There are 8 people coming to Sydney, and we're pretty confident 5 will take those spots. And we're just opening up 5 spots at a time, right? Each quarter, right? Why? Because we feel that that's the best way to grow a community of like-minded people with values that are aligned, because we get the choice. It's not always about
Yeah.
money, right? If you play the long game, you will, Patagonia, if you play the long game, Microsoft, you play the long game, Zappos, they've got a wow customer service philosophy. You've got to play the long game. And I think too many
Yeah.
people, social media, ads, has created this whole, like, I fucking want this now society. And it's like, mate, chill the fuck out, right? And by the way, if you can't handle me swearing, then you can't work with me, right? I mean, and I can go a whole episode without swearing, but I'm passionate about these things. Like, it drives me crazy that I meet so many amazing people who want it now, right? Don't be what I used to be. I used to be like that, and 80 ventures later, 23 massive failures, and there were one massive failure, 22 other failures. They hurt, and so I want people to avoid that. So, by the way, you've got some hungry boys, so we probably want to wrap this up. I can see that they're Blake. Blake, say hi. What are you wearing today? Oh my gosh,
Pajamas. I haven't got dressed today.
have we got a shy Blake? Shy
Ninja
Blake.
Turtle pajamas. I'm gonna say he's been fighting with his brother by the look of the tears in his eyes. So
Oh, poor buddy. Right?
he'll be hiding to tell me something when they
Oh, it's
finish.
okay, Blake.
Yeah.
Mummy can go in a second. So I think that really wraps it up. I mean, I'm not sure if this thing's broken, but we got 1 like and we've got no viewers. So today the thing hasn't worked. I'm not sure why,
Who knows?
but
We'll make sure that we share this across all of our platforms so people can continue the conversation, because I think there's so much to this. I think we could be talking for another half an hour about culture and what it means individually. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that I've taken from the insights that you've shared today, is that it is a very personal journey for you as a business owner, as an employee, as a stakeholder. It's the relationships and how you want them to form in your life, in your
absolutely,
business, and for everything around you. Yeah.
yeah. And
So, Christian Lavossi. Oh, go. Sorry, cut you off.
nothing. I just saw start working with Christian. That's what Belinda says all the time. and it's up on screen. But yeah, look, I think wonderful conversation on culture, and hopefully there was some wonderful takeaways for people and some insights. I believe next week we've got a brand new intro and an outro video coming. We're
We
going
do.
pro, thanks to Blake. Right, we're going pro. Blake, you now wear a helmet when you're on a skateboard, don't you, buddy? Right, when you're showing off
A
to your
helmet
girlfriend.
is a must.
That's right. All right, Simone, thank
Yeah.
you as always.
Thank you, Christian, for your time and your insights. This has been the Hot Seat. We will be back next week with some more hot topics and great advice to support you and your business. See you then.
With Kristian is a game changer. Hi, I'm Adrian Lee from GrowthLink Coaching and Consulting. I started working with Kristian in August 2020 as his LinkedIn growth consultant. We worked together on his LinkedIn brand for about 12 months before becoming business partners in Growth Outsourced late 2021. Kristian is a hidden genius. He helped me break through a significant financial target by restructuring my growth consulting online business offer. I don't know of any one person who can give you so much focus, clarity, and structure to live your purpose and get shit done. He holds you accountable to your words and gives you the tough love when you need it. I love his no BS approach to business and life. Everyone needs a Kristian Lavolsi in their life. Do whatever you have to work with Kristian. This is just the beginning for us, and I am super pumped to continue growing together.